This is China's latest tech failure. They're doing a copycat of Waymo, which is Robo-taxi or self-driving taxi. But it's a failure on a much larger scale, which I'll discuss in detail in the second half. But first, let's talk about the faking part. Trying to rival Tesla and Waymo, except they aren't all that self-driving. This is the driving center where remote drivers constantly keep in watch of the vehicles on the road, and they can take over if anything goes wrong. Although this isn't unique, Waymo has something similar. What is interesting and everybody's talking about it is what percentage of dividing between the actual autonomous driving powered by AI and mapping versus a remote driver taking the actual control is something that I don't think we'll ever get an answer to, because this is China. But knowing their habits of faking numbers, we really can't exclude the possibility that the remote driver is the one doing the actual driving, which I'll highlight some evidence to suggest this might be the case. Now, this is China's Google, Baidu, and one of their subsidiary company developed the service called Apollo Go, which again is to rival Alphabet or Google's parent company service, which is called Waymo. And currently, it's being launched in a testing phase in the city of Wuhan, rolling out about 400 plus cars. And their goal is by the beginning of next year to go up to about 1,000 or so. Now, it's already having problems on the road. Now, Baidu claims that ever since the rolling out of this testing phase, there hasn't been any major accidents. But of course, photos proof contradicts that claim. And videos also tell a different story. In this video, we see these two autonomous robotaxis meeting head on, and neither of them want to yield to the other car, so it just became a standstill. And then also another video here, multiple of these self-driving cars refused to go, so it created this traffic jam situation. And of course, there are other crashes or random sort of behaviors that's been encountered since this program came out. Now, in this video, the cars allegedly stopped due to a crash in the system, and so the traffic police, they can't really do anything about it because there's no driver, and they're simply, shutting down in the middle of the road, and the passengers inside allegedly can't get out. And this video shows the car, this robo-taxi was ordered to come pick him up, but it decided that the best way to stop is in the middle of the road, and this guy complains about how the mapping and the driving situation is still not optimal. Clearly, that's a software issue.
这在外面停车去危险了。哎，站了站了。哎，你进来呀！你坐外面干什么？后面的都死了，大哥。你停旁边来，我这怎么上车呀？你停旁边来呀，我怎么上啊这？你要我现在扫码上车？我勒个天！你要我现在在这里扫码上车吗？你？ 怎么，大哥？我下了你的车子，你干什么？哎，哎！老子排的累死了！哎，我的天哪！我没说错吧，师傅？我没有说错吧？师傅，你能不能不要一惊一乍？旁边刚才那个电动车离那远，你一急刹。
Which again brings me about that claim. If the softwares aren't doing so well, one of the advantage that China has is the 5G network, so the remote driver can really take over any time and you wouldn't notice it, because obviously if you're the passenger inside the vehicle, everything seems the same as there's no driver. The question is, if the software and the AI training module isn't in place to optimize essentially what companies in the West have been trying to do for many years through their development, training, etc., to build the database. Why roll it out in China in such a short amount of time and essentially just trying to compete against a service that's still not established in the for example, in the United States? Well, the only answer I can give is nationalism. They need to compete for the sake of competing, and they need to win it for the sake of nationalism. We see that from the videos and photos, there seems to not be enough these remote drivers. So they're watching 2 to 3 cars per person. And obviously that's not a lot of attention span for each car, especially if they're told to take over the driving for one of them. They can't simultaneously focus on the other ones. And so it really creates a situation where I believe some of these videos that we're seeing, these malfunctions are caused by remote drivers unable to multitask. Now, this is not to blame them, but it's a situation. So it begs the question, if they're doing this fake self-driving, if remote driving is really the common occurrence still. Now, obviously, for the technical reason that the software isn't complete, they need assistance at the current stage to ensure that safety is, of course, the uttermost top priority for the passenger. They have to do this. That's totally fine. But then what's the point of branding this as a self-driving car in the first place? Or simply, why do you need to have it come out now? And really the bigger question is, if all you did was get rid of the driver in the car to replace him with a hired remote driver, what's the point? In this video, this is not from Apollo Go, but this is from BYD, who is also working on their own autonomous driving module and has just crashed on the side of the road. And again, it's a reflection that the technology is not there yet. While they can't compete against Tesla's FSD or potentially Waymo in the matters of the software side of things, what they do have as an advantage is that in China, they can do things with a lower production cost on the cars, and they can roll out cars faster, implement it in a more systematic way, given the fact that this is China. And they do also have the advantage of that 5G network. Obviously, there's also other concerns with what if the car is surveilling you? What if it's recording you? Or what if, there's certain situations where you're locked down inside the car? Very possible scenarios, but just to stick with the topic, if you really think about it, when you implement this on a larger operation or large scale operation, you need the support of the government, at least on the municipal level, right? So the city officials need to work with you. It won't take months or even maybe 1 or 2 years. It will take maybe half a decade for this to come out across China. Huge risks, which I'll talk about next, but compare that to the situation in the United States, for example. Waymo is in a limited number of cities, and they're still in this very, very limited traffic sort of region in which you can operate on. I think this hurdle will be much lower for China once you basically see that, Baidu is the premier data company in China. So there's much less hurdles for Baidu than it is for Google to get their self-driving cars approved in the United States. But so let's talk about the bigger question, right? What happens if autonomous driving, self-driving cars, or robo-taxis become the mainstream? What you're essentially doing is, for the sake of competing for nationalistic points, you sacrifice an entire industry and a huge population that works in that industry. So if you get rid of the Uber drivers or the taxi drivers, you replace them with a autonomous vehicle, then in a society where you rely on creation of technology for the betterment of that society, it might work, provided that this same society can provide an alternative for those people that may lose their jobs because of that. There's a term called creative destruction, right? I think it was an Austrian economist. I can't remember his name. I think it was Schumpeter. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. He coined this term creative destruction. The idea is that old technology will become obsolete because of new innovations. And in turn, you basically destroy the past, but you create something new. So then let's take that and examine if the same sort of principles would apply in the Chinese society, which, by the way, the current economy is not supporting creative destruction. It is not creating a betterment out of existence that is supporting this structure, right? It's on a negative trend. Things are going down. Many people that lost their jobs, high-paying wage jobs, are looking to go into a lower level of pay, like paying jobs, such as maybe you used to work in tech, now you're working as a delivery driver. Delivery drivers, which could also be replaced by autonomous delivery vehicles, it's already a saturated market because you have so many people who are getting into that market from a level above or a few levels above. And so everybody's looking for these lower end paying jobs simply because there's no other jobs available. Again, so I'm trying to reiterate the point that for the sake of competing for nationalistic purposes, they're willing to sacrifice, at least from the trajectory that it looks like they're going on, sacrifice that population's opportunities and livelihood to achieve that. Again, I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight, but if this is the trend, right, the Great Leap Forward 2.0, essentially trying to use these industrial results to compete against the other side at any sort of expense, really there's no regards for the potential disaster it could cause. All it's focusing on is getting those numbers. So the central question for all of this is, what is the inclusive value in terms of creating, I guess you would say, a functionality in the society? Or you could say that by introducing AI-driven taxis, what is it actually achieving for society? Is it doing any harms or is it benefiting it? At the current stage in China, it's doing more harms than good. Think about it. People aren't just going to increase their number of travel, spending more money just because you replace the driver with a robot. It doesn't work like that because transportation is you going from A and B. You're not going from A and B repeatedly throughout the day because that's not what people do. And so it's not like the technology difference is going to increase or drive the economic output in that particular part of the industry. So no matter if you're using spaceships or you're using, steam trains, it's still getting from point A to point B. Now, the point is, as an emerging technology, you're supposed to have ample opportunities to demonstrate to the public, to society, that this is beneficial in what ways. But if at the beginning of it, people are already seeing the flaws with how you're going to be cutting jobs, then that's not really the point here. Like, we go back to the Waymo, which is supposed to be the rival, right? They waited 6 years before they got an approval to start implementing a very limited number of testing zones and then slowly being able to operate on the road. And China is deciding to skip that 6 years and go from 0 to 100. And while they can do that, it really doesn't make sense from a longevity perspective. So when you're just skipping the integral part in the middle for the result, you inevitably get something that we've all seen that's been happening in China. Whether that's with chips, 5G, with EVs, or with any other technology sort of advancement, China seeks those like really quick and fast ways to sort of surpass the other side. But in the long run, you see all those problematic things start to surface. And this is just the latest one.